In this video, we're going to talk about family diversity and how that is going to impact you as a teacher. So there are three attributes that contribute to family diversity, and we'll look at each one of those separately. Family structure, which we talked a little bit about last time, the ethnic and cultural background, and then religious traditions. And we learned that there are all kinds of things that influence the family structure, but there have also been lots of changes along the way to the typical family and what we see as a family today. So, again, we talked about the expectations that you have of your students and getting past that middle class, white expectation with traditional families, and opening up your mind to understanding that there are a lot of different family makeups and types, and that you're going to have students from all those different family types in your classrooms. So we need to have an open mind and just recognize that we have these preconceived notions sometimes that we come to the table with, but we have to do away with those so we can do best for the children. So one type of families are married couple families. Obviously, this is what we think of normally when we think of traditional. It's also called an intact family, husband, wife, and children. But there are also changes that happen in these kinds of families where moms work more outside of the house, and there are other people who take care of the children who are younger than school age. And with both parents working, we need to remember and think about accommodating them. We'll talk a lot about that when we get to talking about parent-teacher conferences and other ways to make connections to families. There are lots of other family structures as well. We kind of hit on these just a little bit last time. So father-headed homes, foster homes, children living with grandparents, gay and lesbian-headed families. And with grandparents playing the role as parent, these types of families or households are actually increasing because of the increase in teen pregnancy and people having children that cannot necessarily always take care of them. Lots of things contribute to that, as you would think: parental neglect, if a parent gets ill, substance abuse, incarceration. There are some positive things that come out of a grandparent heading a household. And what can you think that they might be? Some of them might be that the children have a better idea and a better connection to an older generation, where sometimes kids are scared of older people because they're so different. Well, they might be then open to learning from them because they already see them in that role model role. And then gay and lesbian headed families, we talked about this just very briefly last time. As we talked about, you'll have these kids in your classroom. We don't want to point them out, single them out to be uncomfortable, but let the child do the leading, because you do have to support a relationship with this type of parent. It will be very difficult, but keep the child at the forefront of your mind when you're dealing with these parents whose lifestyles you might not agree with. So just take a minute and think about your personal thoughts and feelings about them and how you will let your light shine to all of your students and all of their parents, no matter what decisions or things that they do in their personal lives. So another part of this chapter talked about ethnic and cultural diversity, and this is another way that families are set apart from each other. Our language and customs and laws and all of those things, religion, came from English immigrants, and the Euro-American culture really has been maintained, ever since the 17th century, but there's still been discrimination no matter. I mean, people who are different they discriminate against each other. And I hate saying that as a blanket statement. But when people are different from you, it is difficult not to have ideas about what you think they are going to do or say. Um, and as a general rule, we expect immigrants to conform or assimilate to our ways. And what do you think of that? And we'll talk more about this when you take teaching social studies about culture and about assimilation and enculturation. But what do you think at this point about expecting people who are different to actually conform instead of keeping their traditional roots and traditions and customs? Um, We'll talk more about that in class. But assimilation is where actually a group adopts the cultural traits of the dominant group. So if Caucasian Americans are the dominant group, then any people coming from a different country or a different culture would try to be more like the white dominant group, and do away with their primary culture. Acculturation has to do with keeping they're fully aware of the dominant culture, and they use those actions and words and mannerisms when they are dealing with people in the dominant culture, but they also maintain their own family life and culture when they are in their personal space. And then enculturation is learning the ideas and customs of an ethnic group from members of that community in order to develop an ethnic identity. So trying to learn about a certain culture. And that's where the balance comes. You can learn about it and be accepting of it. The problem is sometimes that schools put pressure on students to conform. Actually, it's becoming better now, where students can actually keep a lot of their cultural identity with them, and that's even encouraged. There's a lot of research being done right now on this and which way is the best way to go. We also need to think about how each family and each culture, each family can actually be its own culture, but how we can make sure that we support and appreciate each individual family as individuals. And treat them accordingly to what they need. So if you're going from a traditional to assimilated viewpoint, traditional, they're still in their own culture. Assimilated, they try to take on mainstream. And then bicultural, they're actually knowledgeable and comfortable with both cultures and kind of change accordingly. And we will actually be doing an in-class activity to learn about the differences in different actual racial and cultural groups, just so we can get a good idea of what a general idea is. This does not mean that every person in this cultural group thinks the same way. We're just trying to get a good idea so we'll know how to kind of approach people in these different groups. And then the last one is religious diversity. And, being from a Christian university, we want to believe that everybody has some type of religious affiliation, but that is not true. There are lots and lots of different ones, and kids can go to church some of the time or all the time. There's different levels, so we need to be aware of that as well, and it'll be dependent on what kind of school district you work in and what kind of area, whether it be suburban, urban, or rural. What the different religious makeups of that community will be. So you need to be aware of those things. Religion in the schools continues to be an issue, and we'll talk more about that in class. So you do need to be aware if you have children in your classroom who are not allowed to take part in certain things, whether it be the pledge or prayer, or certain groups don't allow their children to participate in birthday parties or any kind of celebrations. So be sensitive to those things and don't make it a big deal, but do ask questions so you can know what the best things to do for their children are. And of course, you are going to be a light to your families every single day, to your children and their parents and their extended families. Even though you cannot explicitly share your faith, you can live Jesus in front of them every single day. And so, in a nutshell, I just want you to be thinking about how we can meet the needs of individual families, whether it be from a different racial perspective or religious perspective, or a family diversity makeup perspective. I want you to think about the students in your classrooms and the parents and the families that they have as people who have different needs. And so I hope that you've enjoyed this chapter, and we'll get to do lots of good things in the class next time. And that's it.